I used to believe that if I loved my child deeply enough, he would one day learn to be grateful. But I never imagined that the very son I raised with my own hands would secretly take out a hefty life insurance policy on me, then plan to make my death look like an unfortunate accident during a so-called hiking trip. What he didn't know was I was the one who set the real plan in motion. Colin, I just wired $330,000 to your account. I dialed my son, Colin Dawson, my voice as gentle as ever. Make sure to get some good supplements for Vanessa. Take care of her and the baby, okay? Colin chuckled immediately, his tone upbeat and effortless, like he'd always been the caring husband and grateful son he pretended to be. Of course, Mom, I'm going to be a dad now. You better believe I'll take good care of Vanessa and our little bundle of joy. I was about to say something more, maybe just linger in that moment a little longer, when he cut me off in a rush. All right, Mom, got to run. Got some stuff going on over here. Not a hint of gratitude in his voice, not even a simple thank you. I swallowed the flicker of disappointment, forcing a soft response. Okay then, love you, sweetheart. But just as I was about to hang up, I heard the one sentence that would echo in my mind for the rest of my life. Finally, the old woman sent the money. My heart dropped. It was Vanessa's voice. I froze, holding my breath, still clinging to a sliver of hope. Maybe Colin would say something, anything to defend me, even just a half-hearted word. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Colin scoffed, the sound sharp and dismissive. She's too damn cautious. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get that money. My fingers began to tremble, gripping the phone tighter without realizing it. In that instant, every warm memory shattered like brittle glass, leaving nothing but a bitter chill in my chest. Colin had always been reckless with money. Before he got married, he'd come to me for handouts constantly, sometimes a few hundred, sometimes thousands, even tens of thousands at a time. And I helped him every time. When he racked up gambling debts, I was the one patching up his messes, one hole after another. But I wasn't naive. I knew what he was like. I always held back a little, kept a safety net just in case. This time, though, I let my guard down completely because he said Vanessa was pregnant. And now I finally saw the truth for what it was, a truth colder than winter, sharper than any knife. After the wedding, Colin rarely came to see me. The calls grew fewer and farther between. I told myself he was just busy, that married life was demanding. I made up 1,000 excuses for him, but today I realized I had never mattered in his world. Through the phone, Vanessa's cheerful voice floated in, chatting with Colin about how they should spend my money. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, phone still in my hand, while a hollow silence rang in my ears like the whole world was laughing at me. Only when the line finally disconnected did it hit me. I regretted everything, but the tragedy was that realization came far too late. What I didn't expect was that just 2 days later, Colin showed up at my doorstep. After living alone for so many years, the sound of someone knocking almost felt unfamiliar. I rubbed my eyes, walked to the door, and opened it to find Colin standing there with Vanessa right beside him. Colin! I offered a warm smile, trying to keep my tone as natural as possible. What brings you here today? He grinned like everything was perfectly normal, handing me a bag of something and pushing it into my arms without a second thought. Had a free day, figured I'd drop by and check on you, he said breezily. Brought you some supplements too. Thought you could use a little boost to maintain good health. Vanessa quickly chimed in, flashing that polished, perfectly rehearsed smile. Helen, you have no idea. Colin talks about you all the time at home. He's just been so swamped with work he hasn't had the chance to visit. I looked at the pair of them and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. They really were committed to the act, playing their parts to perfection. Well then, if they wanted to perform, I had no problem joining in. Just the thought means so much to me, I said softly, patting Colin's arm. Come on in. As soon as he stepped into the living room, Colin gestured for me to sit. Mom, don't just stand there. Let's chat a little. I already had a feeling this visit wasn't just about a friendly check-in, and sure enough, he scratched his head in that deliberately casual way, glanced sideways at Vanessa, then said almost offhandedly, "So you know, Vanessa's pregnant. The apartment we're in is just way too cramped. We were thinking maybe we could move in with you for a while." I didn't answer right away. I simply looked at them and smiled faintly. Vanessa jumped in quickly, letting out a soft sigh as if the idea pained her. "It's really been hard, Helen. The place is so tight, and now with the baby on the way, it's just not healthy for me or the baby." There was a pause. They had been eyeing this house for a long time. The single-family home I live in is nestled near the city center, quiet, safe, with everything nearby. The property value has long passed the $1 million mark. Colin grew up here. He knows exactly what it's worth. I nodded slightly, my voice calm. "Of course you can." Colin's eyes lit up instantly, though something in his face showed he wasn't fully satisfied yet. He hesitated, then pushed a little further, testing the waters. "Well, since we're going to be living here anyway, maybe it makes sense to put the house in my name. That way I can handle the property taxes, the maintenance stuff, take it off your plate." Vanessa followed up sweetly, her voice tender, almost condescending. "Exactly, Helen. We're family, right? You've done enough. You should be relaxing now, not worrying about chores and bills." Listening to their little duet, I felt a strange sense of detachment, even amusement. Once upon a time, I would have agonized over every one of Colin's requests, willingly giving up anything for him, but now he acted like everything I owned was his by default. Like all I needed to hear was, "You're my mom," and I'd roll over and hand him the world. But this time, there wasn't the slightest ripple in my heart. "Sure," I said softly. Colin froze for a moment. Vanessa's expression flickered, surprise flashing in her eyes as if they hadn't expected it to be this easy. I simply pressed my lips together, still smiling as I looked at them. "Go on then, keep playing your little show. I'm curious to see just how far you think you can take it." Ever since I agreed to let Colin and Vanessa move in, the atmosphere in the house had shifted subtly but unmistakably. On just their second day here, Vanessa couldn't wait to cozy up next to me on the couch, wearing that carefully practiced, sugar-sweet smile. "Helen," she said gently, "how's the house transfer coming along?" I looked up at her and let out a quiet sigh. "Still needs a few more days. The process is a bit more complicated than I expected." Her smile stiffened for a moment, just a flicker, but she quickly recovered with a breezy laugh. "That's fine, we're in no rush. We'll wait." Of course, they'd wait. They had no choice. Until that paperwork was finalized, the house still legally belonged to me. From that day on, their entire demeanor shifted into something disturbingly wholesome. Vanessa started waking up early to make breakfast for me. Colin, who hadn't lifted a finger in years, suddenly offered to clean the kitchen. Every word, every gesture was soaked in sweetness, the perfect portrait of a doting daughter-in-law and a considerate son. But I knew better. It was all a performance. They were just biding their time, waiting for the right moment. Colin had never been the type to serve anyone. As a boy, he treated me like a maid, expecting meals and favors as if they were his birthright. As a grown man, he barely bothered with a phone call, let alone any sign of affection. And now, suddenly, he was wiping down my dining table. What a joke! I'd poured my life into raising him, sacrificed everything for his future, and in return, he saw me as nothing more than a gold mine to be drained. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, haunted by a question that wouldn't let go. Was I being too cold, too heartless? But if I were truly cold, would I have forgiven him so many times? Would I have bent over backward, giving him chance after chance? I kept hoping he'd change, kept believing that somehow, the sincere motherly love could cure anything. And just as I was questioning whether I'd become too distant, I heard whispers coming from the living room. I'm not the kind of person who eavesdrops, but in that moment, something compelled me to move softly, slowly toward the door. I pressed my ear to the wood, and what I heard became a memory I would never be able to erase. "As soon as she signs over the house," Colin said, his voice low and cold, "we kick her out." I froze. Vanessa giggled, barely containing her excitement. "Exactly, and by then all her inheritance should be ours anyway by Mother Colin." Scoffed, "She doesn't mean a damn thing to me. He's just dead weight. I've got you now. What do I need her for?" A chill shot straight through my spine. This was the child I loved with everything I had. I held our home together. I raised him, watched him grow. I bailed him out of every mess, every debt, and now in his eyes, I was nothing more than a burden. Where did I go so wrong? What did I do to raise such an ungrateful, heartless man? Maybe I loved him too much. Maybe I gave too freely, believing that love was about selfless sacrifice. And maybe that sacrifice taught him he was entitled to everything. My mind drifted to a memory I hadn't visited in years. Colin was still in college the first time he got tangled up in gambling. He racked up tens of thousands in debt before I even knew what was happening. When the loan sharks came knocking, I realized just how deep he'd sunk. He knelt at my feet, sobbing, begging me to save him, swearing he'd never gamble again, and I believed him far too easily. I cut him off from his bank accounts, locked him in the house, hoping he'd finally see the damage he was doing. But instead, he raged. He smashed things, kicked doors, screamed threats. "If you keep this up, I'll kill myself," he yelled. Still, I couldn't bring myself to give up on him. I wanted so badly to believe there was hope. Until one day, I brought him a bowl of hot soup. He snatched it and threw it in my face. The scalding liquid burned my arm red and raw. He stood over me, seething. "How long are you planning to torture me?" I remember kneeling there silently, cleaning up the shattered bowl and spilled soup while my skin blistered, saying nothing. Was it wrong to bail him out, to give him another chance? Or was my real mistake believing that someone so emotionally hollow could ever learn to love? Now, on the surface, his life looked more put together than ever, but he had only grown colder, more calculating, more greedy. In his eyes, I no longer had any worth. That night, I finally cried myself to sleep. What I didn't know was something even more vicious was already waiting just around the corner. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the room as I slowly opened my eyes. Out of habit, I turned toward the side of the bed. Goofy, the rug beside the bed, was empty, no sign of the old companion who curled up at my feet every morning, nudging me awake with his damp little nose. A tight knot formed in my chest. I sat up, threw off the blanket, and instinctively glanced toward the bedroom door. By now, Goofy should have been there, waiting, tail wagging, ready for our usual morning walk in the backyard. But today, he wasn't. "Goofy, come here, sweetheart." I clapped my hands and walked to the doorway, scanning the living room. I checked near the couch, under the dining table, by the stairs, nothing. I headed to the kitchen. His water bowl by the fridge was still full, which meant he'd been home last night, but his food dish was empty. A wave of unease started to rise in my chest. "Goofy." I called again, my voice louder now. Walking toward the back door, I stepped into the yard. The freshly mowed grass glistened with dew, the morning air rich with the scent of earth, but I couldn't enjoy any of it. "Goofy, come on, this isn't funny." My voice echoed across the stillness, but only the chirping of birds answered me. My fingertips grew cold. That gnawing anxiety had now settled into something darker, dread. I rushed back inside and searched every room. I looked behind the sofa, under the bed, in closets, and behind bathroom doors. Still nothing. Finally, I walked over to his dog bed. That little corner, once cluttered with old blankets, toys, and his favorite squeaky ball, was now pristine, as if no dog had ever lived there. That's when it hit me. He hadn't wandered off. He'd been taken. A chill shot up my spine, like a knife tracing the length of my back. I turned and walked into the living room. Colin and Vanessa were sitting at the dining table, eating breakfast without a care in the world. Vanessa was dragging her manicured nails against the plate, making an irritating scraping sound. I paused, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Colin, have either of you seen Goofy?" Colin didn't even look up. He bit into a strip of bacon and waved his hand casually. "Oh, the dog? I took him out this morning and dumped him somewhere." A deafening roar exploded in my mind, like my whole body had been hollowed out in a single blow. "You've what?" My voice came out in broken gasps. My nails dug into my palms as I struggled to keep control. Colin finally glanced up, chewing his food with lazy indifference. "It's just an old dog, always getting in the way. Figured the house would be a lot quieter without him." My ears rang. My stomach churned like I'd been punched in the gut. "You have no idea what he meant to me," I said, my voice shaking, my fingertips pale and trembling. He shrugged, completely unfazed. "Come on, Mom. Don't make such a big deal out of it. You're 60 years old. What are you doing keeping a dog around anyway? You've wasted 12 years and God knows how much money on that mutt. I did you a favor. Now you don't have to deal with it anymore." I stared at him, lips quivering, speechless. Vanessa sat down, her fork dabbing at her mouth with a napkin, and said casually, "Honestly, Helen, you should be thanking Colin. He made the right decision for you." I didn't reply. I just stood there, frozen. My eyes drifted to the coffee table. An old faded photo sat there. In it, I was sitting on the couch, holding a 1-year-old Goofy in my arms, smiling with a warmth I could still remember vividly. That dog had been my comfort, my companion, my only constant, and now they had taken him from me without a flicker of remorse. The morning sun poured through the windows, but I had never felt so cold. It was as if my heart had finally caved in, collapsing into a void so dark and deep I couldn't even find the bottom. Colin had hurt me before. I'd swallowed the pain. I'd accepted that I'd raised an ungrateful, selfish man, but I never thought the final blow, the one that would finally break me, would come from a dog. In that moment, I understood something with painful clarity. It was time to cut this farce of a mother-son bond once and for all. By the time I walked away from the dining table, Colin and Vanessa still showed no signs of remorse. If anything, they seemed to believe their behavior was perfectly justified. I spent the entire afternoon sitting quietly in my room, my heart slowly returning to a state of eerie calm. "Goofy, if you were still here, I'd want you to see this, see how they'll pay for their cruelty." The next day, I returned home with a document carefully disguised as a house transfer agreement, smiling as I handed it to Colin. "All the paperwork is ready," I said evenly. "Consider it a gift to your little family." Colin's eyes lit up instantly. He snatched the papers from my hand like a man who just hit the lottery, his voice brimming with excitement. The noise brought Vanessa down from upstairs, her face glowing with barely concealed delight. She leaned in to scan the document quickly, her smile stretching wider by the second. But when she reached the final page, her expression faltered just slightly. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion passing through them. Then she dropped onto the couch, crossed her legs, and assumed the posture of a woman fully in control. "Well then, I guess this house is ours now, so when are you moving out?" Just as I expected, I blinked in feigned surprise. "Move out? Where would I even go?" Vanessa shrugged, her voice colder than ever, brushing away any pretense of familial obligation. "That's your problem, not ours. We're not responsible for where you live." I turned to Colin, my eyes filled with a calculated plea. "I really don't have anywhere to go. Couldn't I stay here just for a while?" He looked away, avoiding my gaze. "There are plenty of rentals out there. Just find a place." But I couldn't leave, not yet, not until everything was in place. I gently took his arm, my voice soft and subdued. "I've been taking care of you so well here. I can keep cooking, cleaning. I won't be any trouble." Vanessa frowned, clearly weighing the pros and cons, then gave a casual nod. "Fine, let her stay for now." At least she's useful. In that moment, she already saw herself as the mistress of the house. Colin, seeing her agree, didn't bother to argue. Yeah, whatever, stay. I lowered my head, hiding the smile that curled at the corner of my lips. The more relaxed they became, the easier it would be to expose them. The truth was, I'd seen through them long ago, ever since the wedding preparations when Colin drained every cent I had to fulfill Vanessa's extravagant demands. The overpriced ceremony, the luxury car, the down payment for their apartment. I paid for it all, and now here I was again, back in my own home, playing the part of an unpaid housemate. From that day on, Vanessa no longer hid her sense of entitlement. Bring me some water, she barked one afternoon, slamming her palm on the table. She was calling over a servant. Seriously, you're getting worse at this. I forced a tight smile and brought her the water. She took one sip, then immediately spat it out, splashing me in the process. Are you trying to burn me alive? Me and the baby? The fury that surged in me almost shattered my composure, but I managed a thin smile. Sorry, I'll get you another one. She clicked her tongue in annoyance and waved me off. Forget it. Go grocery shopping. Make something decent for dinner. I nodded, picked up the grocery bags, and stepped out the door. But the moment I crossed that threshold, a plan had already formed in my mind. I drove to the store, calmly selecting ingredients while assembling my version of a revenge menu. No, it wouldn't be cheap tricks like greasy fast food or sugar-laden desserts. That was too obvious, too easy to trace back. No, I'd serve them something far more subtle, far more effective. I filled my cart with comfort food, high-calorie, addictive, deceptively indulgent dishes, creamy mashed potatoes, buttered toast, baked macaroni and cheese, duck confit, sweet pumpkin soup, and, of course, all their favorite processed meats and high-sodium sauces. Everything they loved, everything that sounded hearty and nourishing but would slowly weigh them down, fog their minds, dull their bodies. That night, I laid out a full spread. Colin devoured the cheesy casseroles and risotto like a starved animal, chuckling between mouthfuls. Mom, your cooking's better than ever. Vanessa sipped the thick, oily pumpkin cream soup I had deliberately made extra rich, a pleased smile on her face. Looks like keeping you around was a smart move after all. Eat as much as you like, I said sweetly, pushing more food toward them. You both look like you've lost a little weight lately. I watched them gorge themselves, suppressing the grim smile rising in my chest. They didn't notice a thing, not the trap slowly closing around them, not the fatigue that would soon creep in, not the fog that would begin to cloud their judgment. And I simply kept cooking. The next day, and the day after that, I followed the same pattern, meal after meal. The more they ate, the calmer I felt. Every bite brought me one step closer. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, something threw my plan off course. While I was tidying the living room, I happened to glance at Colin's laptop, left open on the couch. In the next second, my blood turned to ice. While I was tidying up the living room, my eyes happened to drift toward Colin's open laptop. He must have forgotten to close it, its screen still glowing, paused on a browser window. I hadn't intended to snoop, but the words on the screen stopped me cold. How to take out a high-value life insurance policy for an elderly family member. Common methods of going missing without protection. How to reassign a trust fund beneficiary after death. I only read a few lines before a chill spread down my spine, settling like ice along my back. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty my life. It had been reduced to a dollar amount, a target with a payout. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was dumb luck, but that one accidental glance might have just saved my life. Without hesitation, I grabbed my coat and drove straight to the insurance office. Sitting at the reception desk, I tried to keep my voice steady. Hi, I'd like to check if anyone has taken out a policy under my name. The employee typed for a few moments, then pulled up a file. Yes, Miss Dawson, he nodded. There is indeed a high-value life insurance policy registered under your name. Premium tier, actually one of the most expensive plans we offer. I took the document with trembling fingers. My hands felt like ice. I didn't need more proof. I knew exactly what Colin and Vanessa were planning. To them, I wasn't family. I was a payout waiting to be collected. When I returned home, they were lounging on the couch waiting for me like nothing had happened. Colin surprisingly stood to greet me. He even reached for my bag with that familiar phony warmth. "Hey, Mom, you must be exhausted from running around today." He always pulled out the dutiful son act when he needed something. I kept my expression unreadable as I sat down. "What's all this about?" Colin scratched his head, trying to appear casual. "We were thinking maybe we could take you out to the National Forest tomorrow, hike some trails, get some fresh air, change of scenery." Vanessa chimed in immediately, placing a gentle hand on my back, her voice dripping with contrition. "I've been so moody lately, snapping at you for no reason. I'm really sorry, Helen. I thought it might be nice to reset, spend some peaceful time together." I nearly laughed out loud at the performance. If I hadn't already uncovered their plan, I might have actually believed this little charade of affection. But I smiled and nodded. "Sure, sounds nice. I'll go." They both looked momentarily stunned by how easily I agreed. Vanessa was the first to recover, quickly smiling and ushering me toward my bedroom. "Great. Then you better go start packing. We're leaving early." I didn't respond. I just went to my room and locked the door behind me. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at the empty backpack, my hands curling slowly into fists. I already knew what they intended to do, but what they didn't know was that I had started planning long before they ever did. It wasn't just them waiting for tomorrow. So was I. The ending wouldn't be what they imagined. After breakfast, we set off. I sat quietly in the passenger seat of Colin's car, watching the scenery grow increasingly barren as we left the city behind. The farther we drove, the quieter my heart became, calm in a way that felt almost ominous. They had chosen a remote state park on the outskirts of town. I'd heard of it before. Every year there were reports of hikers who mysteriously disappeared or accidentally fell from the cliffs, treacherous terrain, unmonitored trails. The place had earned a reputation among locals, not a good one. Colin knew exactly what kind of place. This was precisely why he chose it, and I knew it too. "We were here," he said, pulling up near the base of the mountain. As I stepped out, a sharp chill crept up my spine despite the daylight. Vanessa immediately looped her arm through mine, her voice overly cheerful. "Helen, what are you spacing out for? Come on, don't kill the mood." I offered a warm smile in return. "Of course, we're here to relax today, aren't we?" We began hiking up the steep trail, winding higher and higher until the sun had turned the sky a glowing shade of crimson. When we finally stopped to rest near a scenic overlook, we were just a few steps from the summit. Colin gestured toward a large rock. "Mom, sit down, take a breather." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a drink, handing it to me. "It's an electrolyte drink. Thought it might help you recharge." I took the bottle with a grateful nod and raised it to my lips, just enough to make it look like I was drinking. I never swallowed a drop. As I lowered the bottle, I caught a fleeting glance exchanged between Colin and Vanessa. That smug curl at the corners of their mouths confirmed what I already knew. Perfect. I pulled 2 energy bars from my bag and held them out. "You two should eat something too. It's been a long climb." They took the bars eagerly, tearing into the wrappers without a second thought. So eager, in fact, they didn't even notice the faint tear marks I'd carefully concealed on the packaging. I sat calmly on the rock, pretending to rest. Then I let my body go limp and collapsed to the ground right on cue. I heard Vanessa's delighted laugh. She actually drank it. That was way too easy. Colin's voice followed, colder than I'd ever heard it. "Sorry, Mom, but I really need that insurance money." I felt them start to drag me toward the edge, likely aiming for a spot off the trail where no one would find a body easily. I counted silently in my head. Then a sudden noise, 2 heavy crashes hit the ground behind me. I opened my eyes and stood up slowly, brushing the dirt off my clothes. They lay unconscious on the ground. You see, I never drank that electrolyte concoction. I'd only pretended to. The real trick was in the energy bars, laced with the very sedatives they had hidden in the house. Over the past few days, I'd quietly found their stash, slipped a little out, and today I simply returned it. Trying to trap me? You're far too naive. I shot them one last glance, cold and cutting, then slung my backpack over my shoulder and began walking back down the mountain. As night fell, the temperature would drop sharply. Wild animals often wandered these trails. If they didn't find their way back down before dark, well, that would be their lesson to learn. Let them have a taste of real survival for once. I hummed to myself as I descended, step by step. Just as I neared the trailhead, I suddenly heard faint cries nearby, weak, broken sounds calling for help. I stopped in my tracks, turned toward the sound, and carefully made my way through the brush. A man lay on the ground, his leg clearly injured, his face pale, eyes glassy from pain. He looked to be around my age. His voice trembled. "Can you call for help?" I didn't hesitate. I dialed emergency services and stayed by his side until an ambulance arrived. At the hospital, I sat quietly in the waiting room as they wheeled him into the ER. A while later, a doctor came out. "He's going to be okay, out of danger." When he finally regained consciousness, I heard his name clearly for the first time. "Thank you," he said softly. "I'm Leonard Graham, Executive Director of Graham Group." My heart skipped a beat. The Graham Group, the very firm Colin's company had been desperately trying to secure investment from. How interesting. Fate never forgets its timing. I never mentioned the connection between Leonard and Colin. "You saved my life," Leonard said from his hospital bed, still weak but gripping my hand with surprising strength. "If there's ever anything you need, anything at all, just ask. Whatever I can do, I will." I smiled gently and patted the back of his hand. I just happened to be there. Doing the right thing doesn't always need a reward. He spoke with such sincerity, but I preferred to keep this unexpected encounter to myself, a quiet twist of fate I'd rather treasure privately. As I rose to leave, I saw the hallway outside his room was already crowded with executives, assistants, and friends, all rushing in to check on him. Even lying in that hospital bed, Leonard carried the calm authority of a man used to commanding a room. He wasn't just another patient. He was someone important. For the first time in a long while, I felt something in my chest loosen, a weight lifted. I didn't know whether Colin and Vanessa had safely returned from the mountain, but strangely, I wasn't in any rush to find out. Colin had probably never imagined, not even for a second, that his frail old mother was actually a longtime member of a local mountaineering club, trained in wilderness first aid and in better physical shape than most people her age. That night, I slept like a baby. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was spilling softly across my pillow. The clock read 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone, dialing with shaky, breathless urgency. "Hello? Please, you have to help me. My son and daughter-in-law went hiking at Sable Ridge yesterday. They haven't come back. I'm so worried. Please, please find them." The operator's voice grew serious at once. "Ma'am, stay calm. We're dispatching a search team immediately." 5 hours later, I got the call. We found them. I took my time getting to the hospital. When I opened the door to their room, I found Colin and Vanessa lying in their beds, pale and haggard, like a pair of soaked stray cats. Colin turned his head weakly. "Mom, where did you go?" I blinked innocently, keeping my voice soft. "I'm not sure. I just remember waking up in a hospital room." I rolled up my pant leg to reveal a neatly wrapped ankle bandage. The doctor said it was just a mild sprain. Vanessa gasped, her breath still ragged. We passed out all of a sudden. Suddenly, it doesn't make sense. Did you?" I quickly waved my hand, cutting her off with a look of hurt surprise. "What are you saying? Why would I ever do something like that? I love you both." "I've been sick with worry." Colin frowned as if trying to piece things together, but said nothing. Forget it, he mumbled, finally flopping back against the pillow in defeat. During their hospital stay, Vanessa didn't miss a beat in returning to her usual self. I'm craving Boston lobster today. Tomorrow, I want abalone soup. I need to nourish my body. Once, I would have gently reminded her to eat light, but not now. I simply smiled, nodded, and went to the kitchen. I prepared everything just the way she liked and added a rich chicken soup, never missing a serving. She drank it down with satisfaction, and I watched quietly, content. On the day they were discharged, I knew this charade had reached its final act. Colin returned to his company, beaming with hope, only to be stopped at the entrance by security. I work here. Why can't I get in? He demanded. The guard didn't flinch. Systems correct. You've been removed. Colin froze. He frantically messaged the company's executives, only to receive a curt reply, your position has been terminated. The company no longer requires your services. It hit him like a brick to the chest. He came home in a daze and collapsed onto the sofa, his eyes hollow. I looked over casually. Rough day? You seem upset. His lips tightened, his fists clenched, then he snapped, unable to hold it in anymore. Am I really that worthless? Why would they fire me? I walked over and gently patted his head. Don't be so discouraged. I have money. I'll take care of you both. You shouldn't stress over work anymore. In fact, why don't I send you two on a vacation to clear your heads a little? What do you say? He looked up, startled by the offer, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but then he nodded. Yeah, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. Of course, he said yes. I knew him too well. He never turned down anything that smelled like an easy benefit. Vanessa chimed in eagerly, a vacation sounds perfect. We deserve a break. And just like that, I booked them a 7-day trip to Thailand. They had no idea this was my final gift to them, one last act of quiet, calculated kindness. As for me, I was already turning the page to a new chapter. Leonard's business card sat quietly in my drawer, waiting. He'd called a few days after the hospital, asking to see me again. I still owe you dinner, he'd said warmly. Not just to say thank you, I really do want to see you again. I ran my fingers over the raised lettering on that card, feeling a softness in my heart I hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, my real life was only just beginning. The very first thing Colin did after landing in Thailand was message me asking for travel money. I transferred the funds without hesitation, even adding with a smile, if it's not enough, just let me know. That one sentence completely unchained their spending from a few thousand to tens of thousands, from fancy restaurants to luxury boutiques. They indulged without restraint. Meanwhile, back home, I began clearing them out piece by piece. I hired a moving company, packed up every last item they owned, clothes, junk, anything with their scent, and sent it all to the community donation center. Anything remotely valuable, I donated to charity. I left nothing behind. Then I changed the locks. By the time they returned from their so-called luxury vacation, my cleanup was already complete, every step executed flawlessly. As soon as they got off the plane, I sent them the final blow, a detailed invoice of everything they had spent during their trip. Every item, every dollar, clearly marked borrower Colin Dawson, because none of that money came from my personal accounts. I had simply advanced it all through Colin's own credit line, pushed past the limit just as he liked to do with everything in life. I had merely followed his instructions and let his name do the paying. They thought my money was theirs to take, but there's no such thing as a free lunch. Colin's call came quickly, his voice laced with panic and fury. What the hell is this? What are these bills you sent me? My voice was calm. The money you spent, Colin, it's yours to repay. He paused, stunned, before erupting, I'm your son. Isn't it normal for me to spend your money? I let out a soft chuckle. Really? You still remember I'm your mother? Tell me, aside from when you needed money, have you ever looked me in the eyes and said, I love you, Mom? I hung up. An hour later, the doorbell began ringing wildly, then pounding. Colin's fist slammed against the door. Mom, open up. You hear me? Vanessa's voice followed, shrill and furious. Is this your way of cutting ties with your own son? What kind of mother does this? I walked slowly to the door and opened it just enough to block the entrance with my body. Colin immediately tried to force his way in, but I stood firm. Excuse me, what do you think you're doing? This isn't your house. His eyes blazed. What do you mean? You gave us this house. Vanessa sneered, arms crossed. Don't act high and mighty. We let you stay here out of kindness. I let out a cold laugh and tossed a folder straight into Colin's face. Take a look whose name is on the deed. Colin opened the folder. His face went pale as he read. This can't be. Vanessa snatched it from his hands, flipping through the pages until her fingers trembled. It still says your name. You tricked us. I raised an eyebrow. You were in such a rush to collect your inheritance, you didn't even read the fine print. That document you signed? Just a non-binding property transfer intent form, not legally valid. Her face turned ashen. Why? Why would you give us a fake contract? I smiled faintly. Because you were too busy celebrating to notice the last line, for display purposes only, not a legally binding transfer of ownership. Colin lost control, shoving me hard. I'm your son. How could you do this to me? I steadied myself, then calmly reached into a drawer. I pulled out another envelope. You're not my son. He froze, the color draining from his face completely. I handed him the envelope. This is a paternity test report. Your biological mother was the woman who broke up my marriage. She had you, then vanished. Your pathetic father was kicked out of my life for it, but I took you in. I raised you. I gave you a home, a name, and an education. I paid your debts, bought you a house, and gave you a family I never had. I never had another child because I gave everything to you. And what did you give me in return? Colin sank to the floor like his spine had snapped, muttering under his breath, No, you're lying. This can't be real. I crouched down, looked him in the eyes, and said quietly, I've already done more than enough for you. Now pay back what you owe and get out of my house. Then I turned to Vanessa. Oh, and about that little drink on the mountain. I never touched it. You two were the ones who took your own medicine. I just returned it to its rightful owners. With that, I slammed the door shut behind me. Outside, Colin's sobs broke through the silence, deep and broken, the sound of someone who had finally woken up, but far too late. I stood on the threshold of my own life at last and didn't look back. All my life, I believed I'd been a good mother. When he lost his way, I was the one who pulled him from the muck again and again. When trouble came, I was the one who held everything together. Without hesitation, I thought that if I loved him deeply enough, eventually he'd give me even a sliver of warmth in return. I was wrong. Love, no matter how sincere, never guarantees it'll be returned. The noise outside my door had finally quieted. I peeked through the peephole and saw Colin and Vanessa collapsed on the doorstep, faces pale, consciousness fading. I didn't hesitate. I called 911. Years of indulgent, high-fat, high-sodium, high-sugar meals combined with their emotional unraveling and stress overload had finally caught up with them, dragging their bodies into collapse. Later, the doctor told me they may never fully recover. Weakness will likely be their new normal. I gave a small smile. That's no concern of mine. As I left the hospital room, Colin managed to whisper one faint sentence. Mom, I'm sorry. I paused, turning just slightly. You're right, I said softly. You should be sorry for being a thankless parasite. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard the sharp beeping of the monitor. A flurry of nurses rushed into the room. I stood outside, watching the chaos unfold behind the glass, nothing more than an observer to a story I no longer belonged to. Maybe I never truly had what people call family at all. My phone rang. A familiar name lit up the screen. Where are you? I'm coming to pick you up. The moment I heard Leonard's voice, something in my chest, tight and bruised for so long, finally softened. I drew in a long breath, wiped away the remnants of emotion from the corners of my eyes, and walked toward the hospital entrance. Soon, a dark sedan pulled up quietly in front. I raised a hand and smiled. "Long time no see," Leonard smiled back from behind the wheel. "It's been too long. I think it's time we finally take each other seriously." I didn't answer right away. I simply opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. Leonard was the kind of man who radiated calm the moment you were near him. Not loud, not overbearing, he never tried to take center stage in my life, but he was always the one holding the light when I felt most lost. In the days that followed, I began to grow used to his presence. He took me to small-town book clubs, encouraged me to join a pottery class at the local art center. We walked together in the mornings, cooked in the afternoons. He listened to me talk about goofy things, and he let me share the darker memories when they surfaced. I began redecorating the house, stripping away all the remnants of a life I once arranged for someone else, replacing it with my own tastes and joy. The kitchen, once a battleground of obligation, became a place of peace where I now cooked only for myself. In the backyard, I planted an herb garden, mint, rosemary, lavender. They thrived under the sun, just like my spirit had begun to. Leonard never made grand promises. He didn't talk of forever. He stayed quietly, steadily living beside me, not for me. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch with tea in hand, and he would gently take my fingers and say, "Helen, you finally stopped living for everyone else." I'd smile and nod. Yes, I was finally living for me. One afternoon, I received an anonymous package. Inside were internal documents, executive-level personnel changes at Graham Group. Colin's name had been fully erased from every project file. I didn't ask who sent it. I already knew. Leonard didn't say a word about it either. He just brewed me a fresh cup of coffee and set it quietly on the table, like he always did. I took the cup, looked at him, and smiled. "Thank you." He only smiled back, saying nothing. In that moment, I realized something. Real happiness doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it simply comes after the storm in the form of a steady hand reaching quietly for yours. 60 years of life, and finally, I was no longer trapped by the walls of one broken relationship. As for what comes next, I don't know if my twilight years will ever read like a fairy tale romance, but I do know this. I'm writing my own story now. That evening, we sat together in the backyard, listening to old jazz records while the sun slowly sank behind the trees. "Helen," Leonard asked gently, "do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" I turned to look at him, my eyes calm and certain. "Maybe I already am."